For Liam, a freelance photographer with a penchant for urban decay, the city was a museum of beautiful death. He spent his weekends hunting for forgotten places, his camera his only companion. He found the St. Ambrose apartment building on a rainy Tuesday, tucked away in a forgotten industrial sector of Baltimore. It wasn't on any urbex forum or map. It was a ghost, waiting patiently to be discovered. The Art Deco facade was crumbling, but its elegant bones still showed. It was perfect. He slipped in through a broken ground floor window, the air inside thick with the smell of damp plaster and decay. The lobby was a masterpiece of dereliction. A grand staircase swept upwards into shadow, and dust motes danced like fairies in the beams of his flashlight. But it was the walls that made him stop breathing. They were covered in graffiti, but it was unlike any tagging he had ever seen. These were vast, mural-like scenes, rendered in a haunting, sorrowful style, almost like charcoal sketches, but with the permanence of paint. The murals depicted ghostly, faceless figures living out sad vignettes within the very rooms of the building. A faceless woman staring out a window. A faceless man sitting at an empty dining table. It was beautiful, tragic, and deeply unsettling. He spent the rest of the day in a creative frenzy, photographing every mural. The art seemed to tell a story, a non-linear narrative of a family's quiet despair. He felt a powerful, obsessive need to document it all before the building was finally torn down. This was his project. This would be his masterpiece. He came back the next day, and the day after. It was on the third day that he noticed something impossible. He was in a third-floor apartment, comparing a new photo to one he'd taken on his first day of the same wall. The mural depicted the faceless family in the lobby. In his original photo, they were standing together, looking towards the door. In the reality before him, the mural had changed. The father figure was now gone from the group, and a new, smaller mural had appeared on the adjacent wall, showing the man alone in the elevator, his faceless head bowed. Liam's heart hammered in his chest. He scrambled through the building, checking his photos against the walls. It was true. The art was evolving. It was a living story, slowly unfurling across the decaying canvas of the building. The narrative was becoming clearer. It was about a family, a father, a mother, a young daughter, and a slow, creeping tragedy that seemed to involve a fire. He could see the faint hints of painted smoke beginning to curl at the edges of the later scenes. The discovery didn't scare him away. It did the opposite. It fueled his obsession. He was no longer just a photographer. He was an archaeologist, the sole witness to a supernatural artistic event. He worked feverishly, mapping the story, trying to predict where the next panel would appear. The line between observer and subject began to blur a week later. He photographed a new, heartbreaking mural of the little girl figure, crying because she had lost her teddy bear in the laundry room. The next day, driven by a strange compulsion, Liam went to the actual laundry room in the basement. There, sitting in a pile of rubble and dust, was a real, soot-stained teddy bear, identical to the one in the painting. He backed away slowly, his skin crawling. A few days later, a new mural appeared in the hallway, showing the mother figure frantically scratching at a boarded-up door. When Liam found the real door, the wood was covered in fresh, deep gouges, splinters littering the floor beneath it. The building wasn't just telling a story, it was manifesting it. The art was bleeding into reality. He was terrified, but he couldn't stop. His project had become his entire world. He stopped answering calls from friends. He ate, slept, and breathed the St. Ambrose. He was losing weight, his eyes were sunken and dark, but his photo collection was a work of genius. The true turning point came on a cold, gray morning. He entered the main lobby and stopped dead. There, on the main wall where the story had begun, was a new addition. It was a new figure, painted with its back to the viewer, holding a camera. It wore his distinct khaki jacket and carried his worn leather camera bag. The faceless mural family was in the background, staring at the photographer. The art knew he was there. It had painted him into the narrative. A wave of dizzying, narcissistic glee washed over his terror. He was part of the art. He raised his camera and took a photo of the mural of himself taking a photo of a mural. The beautiful, terrifying feedback loop was complete. From then on, the photographer figure appeared in all the new murals. It showed him following the family, a ghostly observer. It showed him growing thinner, more frantic. It showed him with dark circles under his eyes, just like the ones he now saw in his own reflection. The art was documenting his own decay alongside the family's original tragedy. He followed the painted narrative to a part of the building he had avoided, the sub-basement boiler room. The air was cold and heavy. The final series of murals was on the damp concrete walls, telling a frantic, overlapping story. It showed the fire he had seen hinted at. It showed the ghostly family trapped. And it showed the photographer figure, him being cornered by them, not with malice, but with a desperate, sorrowful longing. He followed the painted story around the room until he reached the final, main wall. It was a vast, blank space, the only unpainted wall in the entire building. He stared at it, confused. Was this the end? He felt a sudden chill. He turned around. The boiler room door had swung shut, plunging the room into near darkness, save for the weak beam of his flashlight. He heard a soft, rustling sound, like dry leaves skittering across concrete. From the deep shadows of the room, the three faceless figures from the murals began to coalesce, formed from dust and shadow and the building's palpable sorrow. They were solidifying. They weren't aggressive. They simply stood there, their blank faces turned towards him, their painted hands outstretched. They didn't want to hurt him. They wanted to include him. He backed away, his flashlight beam trembling, until his back hit the cold, blank wall. He looked at the figures, then at the empty space on the wall, and finally understood. The story wasn't finished. It was just waiting for its final character. Months later, a new urban explorer found her way into the St. Ambrose. She was a young art student, and she was instantly captivated by the breathtaking murals. She traced the story with her camera, the sad family, the fire, and the strange, gaunt figure of a photographer who seemed to be documenting it all. She followed the story all the way to the lobby, to the first wall. The main mural was now complete. It depicted the three family members, their faceless heads tilted in sorrow. And standing with them, his arm gently held by the mother figure, was the photographer. His face was now as blank and featureless as theirs, his camera hanging uselessly from his neck. He was part of the family portrait. He was part of the stain. The student raised her camera. The composition was tragic, perfect. She had to document this. This would be her masterpiece.